Hello there, Liverpool linked with Martin Zubimendi, the first name that feels plausibly in the frame to be picked up to play holding midfield for Liverpool this summer. Will it happen? Won't it happen? Will there be insight elsewhere on the Anfield Wrap on that? What I've got you here right now is a bit of a look at his numbers, a little bit in comparison to Alexis McAllister last season as well, and then a bit of wider stuff using a couple of different radars that I've created to look at midfielders Liverpool have been linked with in the past. First and foremost, here's him against the La Liga midfielders as an average over the course of last season on StatsBomb's usual midfielder radar. First and foremost, what can we see? Well, he passes the ball really well. He's 95th percentile for pass completion in there as well, but not a ton of deep progressions as you go all the way through this. His XG assisted's quite low, his XG build-up, he's not that involved, not that many dribbles, not that many fouls won, really low turnovers, so he keeps the ball ticking and keeps the ball moving. Not very many pressures or pressure regains, and then pretty solid on the possession-adjusted tackles and interceptions. What we're actually seeing here a little bit, and we talked about Kubo, or I talked about Kubo on a number of gutter shows. Kubo was linked to us as an attacking midfielder earlier in this window, and he only scored 7 goals in the league last season. Sociedad's top scorer only got 9. Sociedad are quite a reactive team. They're not a front foot team. This is why this radar tells us that story where Zubimendi's concerned as much as anything else. Liverpool are buying Zubimendi to play for Liverpool, and we'll come on to some other figures in a minute or two, and we'll look at some of what he does in the Champions League. But I think this is a really important point that so far Zubimendi has been playing for a side who are punching above their weight in terms of where they're finishing in Spain, and who are also punching above their expected goals in terms of where they've been finishing in Spain. They played Champions League football last season, which we'll also touch on in a minute or two. But it's crucial to sort of say he's not playing for one of the better sides within Spain. And as we go through these numbers, we'll see a little bit more. This is StatsBomb's 2.0 midfielder radar. It's a little bit different. It uses their on-ball value metric, a little bit more in terms of defensive actions. You can see that at about 11 o'clock on the radar, and also just in general on there as well. But one of the things we can see, again, is where he pops is turnovers, does not lose the ball very often at all, well above average on that metric. He's also very, very high performing on not being dribbled past. 73% wins his tackles versus getting dribbled past, which is well above the average for a midfielder in La Liga. Move it forward again and we see his defensive activity pulls over more to the right, which is interesting because I think when McAllister's played for Liverpool, he pulls more to the left. Jones, when he plays centre midfield to Liverpool, pulls more to the left as well, and that's what we've seen so far with Slot where Jones is concerned. When Gravenberch's played and Szoboszlai's played, they played more to the right-hand side, and the expectation is that Zubimendi will be coming in to allow Szoboszlai to push further forward more often as part of this. That'd be the plan, you'd think. So it's interesting you get to see him there pull a bit more to the right, although he has done stuff on the left as well. Where we compare him to McAllister, and this is on the usual midfielder radar, I think one of the things that we see first and foremost is that McAllister was brilliant for Liverpool last season, but I also think that one of the things that you actually get to see there is this is a style of play point. McAllister's pressure regains are unbelievably high because Liverpool press and press and press and regain the ball under Jurgen Klopp. Might not be exactly the same this season, but you can see it in the number of pressures as well. Do we believe that Zubimendi doesn't want to press the ball? That doesn't make any sense to us, what we've seen when he plays for Spain, for instance, in bits and pieces. So what we're actually getting here is a flavour. It's a little bit like comparing centre-halves, how that's been. It's a style of play point. What's key, though, is you get to see, again, turnovers are about the same as McAllister, passing percentage about the same as McAllister, and passing adjusted interceptions about the same as McAllister. Again, on the other midfielder radar, you can see this. Stronger in defensive actions than McAllister, with the exception of pressures and tackles and interceptions in there as well. Doesn't dribble it and carry it as much as McAllister, but again, is that something that he's being asked to do? And deep progressions is interesting in there too. When we then move this along to, this is, by the way, just a quick little look at the attacking midfielder winger radar, because at times McAllister plays there, and you get to sort of see that that's a little bit different there as well. Zubimendi doesn't do very much football there at all. We move ourselves forward, though, and take his Champions League numbers and pull in a couple of radars that I've been looking at over the course of the last couple of years in terms of midfielders playing for Liverpool. This first one is one I pulled up against the idea of how Feyenoord looked to play in the middle of the park last season, specifically what Weifer was doing in there. And we can see that Zubimendi was able to play substantially more through balls than the average Champions League midfielder, that he was better at ensuring he wasn't dribbled past than the average Champions League midfielder, that he pops a little bit on possession adjusted tackles and interceptions, and again keeps the ball in turnovers better. Sociedad were in a strong group and they weren't playing a dominant brand of football, so the idea of the other numbers, it doesn't come as that much of a surprise. But we get to see a little bit more when we dig a little bit deeper. Going back to a couple of seasons ago when we were looking at the idea of what Liverpool may or may not want from a midfielder under Jurgen Klopp, it created this radar. And on this one, again, we can see that turnovers stronger than average, as you'd expect. But what becomes really important here is pressured pass percentage. Zubimendi's pressured pass percentage completion sits on this at 86%. That's 92nd percentile. That puts him in the Champions League midfielders. That puts him in the top 10% of midfielders in the Champions League for completing passes under pressure. 86% is really high. What we can also see as well is that his being pressured change in pass only diminishes 3% when he's pressured. That's also quite impressive and better than the average. And his passing percentage in general is 89% completion playing Champions League football. That's also really high. So the fact that that percentage where it changes a little bit is -3 is that it's changing from a really high base to another really high base. It's 92nd percentile for his passing and he's 92nd percentile for his pressured passing across Champions League games last season. Now that's only a small sample, it's 8.590s that he plays, but this is something that I think Liverpool are looking for. The idea of how do we look after this? What else do we see from him when he played Champions League football last season? We see he's really high for opposition half ball recoveries, 7.09 over the course of the Champions League campaign. That puts him 98th percentile. Does that sound like Liverpool? It absolutely does. And we also see that he's very, very high for turnovers. Or more accurately, very, very low, very high performer for turnovers. 99th percentile, 0.35 turnovers every single 90 minutes that he plays. So he's very rarely losing the ball. This is exactly what we've seen so far that Arne Slot might want, and we can see it here in his Champions League numbers from last year. Here's another radar that I produced a couple of years back that you put him up against. And this is the idea of what Liverpool may or may not be looking for from a defensive midfielder. Again, the same things apply. You get to see them as you go round there. Passing percentage, pressured pass, both really, really high in their 91st, 92nd percentile for that. Turnovers, again, really, really high. And we begin to see other things in there as well. Dribbles successfully defended, really high. Ball recoveries, really high playing Champions League football. And then suddenly, in the Champions League level, pressure regains looks a little bit stronger. Sociedad approaching these games a little bit differently. Opposition half ball recoveries. Spool it all the way around again. And he's exceptionally good at aerial win percentages within the Champions League. He's 73% for aerial wins. That puts him at 98th percentile in terms of what he's doing there with his aerial duels. That's exceptional for a midfielder, and he's quite diminutive. He's only 5'11". This would be a concern, but if you're seeing a player who wins that many headers, and that's playing Champions League football, not just La Liga in there as well, then that's something that you can also see why that might interest Liverpool looking ahead to this season and when they're looking to recruit for the heart of that midfield. A lot of this stuff is always going to be about style of play, and it's always going to be about the nature of what opponents are asking you to do, where your side ranks, all of that sort of stuff. But you can see here, first and foremost, why Liverpool may well be interested in this player from those Champions League numbers in particular. And if they're seeing someone who's technically strong, which I think we can now say is going to be a key thing that Arne Slot is going to want from his holding midfielder, plus those other things that we've just discussed in the Champions League sense, then I think that's a player that Liverpool may first and foremost be excited about what he is now, but also what he might become after he's been coached to play in a way for Liverpool, which involves being the dominant side on the front foot, having more of the ball, looking to make it happen and looking to continually ask questions of the opposition. You can see how Liverpool may well see him as someone that they want as one of the four options at the heart of that midfield. We see as well that he also wants to pull to the right hand side. That's where he does most of his defensive work. I can see why Liverpool are interested in this footballer. I can see what he could offer the Reds. He isn't the most exciting footballer on the planet, but that's the nature of this position. The key thing is this: keep the ball moving, keep the ball ticking, and when your battles, the battles come to you. And it looks like Zubimendi could well be a fit for Liverpool in that regard.